want to focus on talking about how the decisions that are being made in the White House may affect rideshare drivers. Now, just because I say that it might happen doesn't mean it's something that I want to happen. I always want to be very clear about that. We're business owners. We should always be looking at how the economy is going and making business decisions that affect our longevity. So the first story we're going to start with today is just looking at the firings that are happening in the government. Now, this is not about whether you agree or disagree with what is happening and doing, with what Trump is doing. This is about how this can affect you and what's happening now. So this is from the AP. It says a comprehensive look at Doge firing and layoffs so far. Thousands of federal government employees have been shown the door in the first month of President Donald Trump's administration as the White House and its Department of Government Efficiency fire both new and career workers, tell agency leaders to plan for large-scale reductions in force and freeze trillions of dollars in federal grants. So they're telling us straightforward that we are firing people, we are going to continue firing people, and that's something you got to keep in mind. It's affected more than just the nation's capital region, home to about 20% of the 2.4 million members of the civilian federal workforce, which does not include military personnel and postal workers. More than 80% of that workforce lives outside the Washington area. Your first thought might be, hey, I don't live in Washington. What does this have to do with me? And it will affect you. But if you do live in Washington, this could affect you in... There are some positives to this where you might have to deal with traffic. We're seeing that a large amount of people are trying to sell their homes in Washington. So if you're in the market to buy a house, the average home price has decreased by, I think it was about $135,000. Average home price decrease, Washington. So this is from January. It says January 2025, the median home price in Washington, D.C. was $553,000. Still a lot of money for a house, which was 9.71% decrease from the previous year. That was based on data from MLS and public records. Like we're seeing a massive amount of people list their homes all at once, and it's causing house pricing to go down. And a lot of you out there are probably like, good, that's great, which is fine. You know, if you live in DC and these politicians are making your prices go up, I understand you're going to be in a better position to buy a home than you were before. But also keep in mind that if you're a driver that lives in Washington, the people who are selling their homes are probably trying to leave because they're not going to work, and that could affect the supply and demand for rides. So that is something you need to factor into your business. And just wait, those of you who don't live there, there's still ways this will affect you in the larger scale of everything that's happening. And what you're gonna see is the people are gonna go through a period of uncertainty. When people do go through a period of uncertainty, they don't spend their money as much. And we can look back in time to when the pandemic just ended. I started driving in the pandemic, so that's where my history with Uber and Lyft started. The first time there was a widespread realization that the pandemic was done for rideshare drivers and that the great money we were earning during that period was going to start declining was when the tech companies had their layoffs, their massive layoffs, if you remember that. And when they had those layoffs, it's not as if the tech bros who are making $250,000 a year suddenly became rideshare drivers. It was that the industries that were supported by them going to work fell apart, and those people became rideshare drivers. We're talking about, this is just a random example. If you had a breakfast shop across the street from a business that gets shut down, those are the type of people who are going to start looking for a new job because they're getting fired because the money that was flowing in and out isn't there anymore. Those are going to be the people who start becoming rideshare drivers and create more saturation. Now, if you're in Washington, I feel really bad for you. You're probably going to start feeling the saturation first and very strongly. And I'm going to keep an eye on it. But you're also going to have to realize, if I'm in a vacation town, people come here to vacation all the time. When people are uncertain about their futures, that's one of the first things that goes. Vacation. People aren't going to be spending money when they're not even sure if they're going to have a job, or some of them just straight up don't. We're seeing a lot of firings, and the first place people like to go, even if it's a transitionary period, is rideshare. The gig apps. It's the lowest barrier of entry. If you can pass a criminal background check, you have a license. Depending on which one you want to do, you're over a certain age. It's the easiest, fastest way to get a job. Most of us, myself included, we started doing this as an intermediary to something else. Most of us don't wake up and say, I want to be a rideshare driver. That's my career. We fell into this, and that's okay. If you play your cards right, you can make a good amount of money. I personally don't believe it's a great long-term thing. I think it's something that should be used as a stepping stone into something else. But now we're going to have a mass wave of other people who are going to start stepping into it. And it's not just the government workers, but we'll get into that. So this one is for the probationary employee layoffs, which I think this is a bigger amount. Says there have been wide-ranging layoffs of probationary employees, those generally on the job for less than a year who have yet to gain civil service protection. Potentially hundreds of thousands are affected. This isn't just in Washington. This one's for the Department of Veterans Affairs. A lot of you have VAs in your city. I know I have one. This could be affecting your local populace too. On February 13th, the Department of Veteran Affairs announced the dismissal of more than 1,000 employees who had served for less than 2 years, according to Sean Pan-Murray, Democrat from Washington, that included researchers working on cancer treatment, opioid addiction, prosthetics, and burn pit exposure. Again, I'm not going to get deep into whether this is good or bad, whether you should be for it or against it. We're just talking about how it's going to impact us. So the Department of Health and Human Services, the jobs of more than 5,000 probationary employees are on the line at the Department of Health and Human Services. On February 14th, officials for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention were told they were losing 1,300 probationary employees, about 1/10 of the agency's workforce, but the final number was closer to 700, according to 2 CDC officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. Now, I know the CDC is based out of, I think, Atlanta. I think the CDC is in Atlanta. Let's verify this. Let's be sure. Yeah, CDC is mostly based out of Atlanta. So if you're in Atlanta, you need to pay attention to that. You know, if you're currently picking up people who work there, start talking to them. And actually, no matter where you are, you should always be trying to dig for information from your passengers. If I know that there is a government body in Charleston, even if it's a state body, I'm asking questions. I'm like, how do you feel about your job? Do you feel secure? Here's a really good example. Let's step away from the government firings. That's an easy, direct correlation that we can see. Let's talk about the fact that a lot of government grants have been frozen. Might not seem like a big deal, but if you have programs in your city that exist purely on the funding of government, which not getting into if that's a good thing or a bad thing, they should probably need multiple sources. That agency, that thing, no matter what they were doing, is no longer going to exist anymore. And indefinitely, we don't know if that funding's coming back. We don't know if that program is just going to straight up get canceled. I'm predicting there will be nationwide a recession. I'm not trying to fearmonger. So what I want to do is I want to establish what it would mean to have a recession so that when it happens, I can say that I said I saw this coming. So it says, according to common rule of thumb, the government defines a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, meaning that the gross domestic product declines for 2 consecutive 3-month periods, indicating a significant decline in economic activity across the economy. The reason why I think that this will happen is, one, we're seeing the layoffs. We're seeing that unemployment is going to increase. When unemployment increases, the amount of money that people start spending decreases, which would decrease the GDP. Now, will it be significant? I think so, especially considering the fact that the grants that the government were giving out, there's some that were going to farmers. You know what? Let me pull up that story. I think that's a pretty good story to highlight how these disappearing grants will cause people to spend less money. So here's one. We're not gonna go through the whole thing. I'm not trying to get too political. I'm just trying to paint the picture of what's actually happening, because it's easy to not realize what's going on, especially when you're just out there in your car hustling and just not paying attention to this stuff because it's bad for your health. I get it. I don't fault anyone who doesn't follow along with this stuff, but I follow along with it because I need to know what's happening out there so I can have the foresight to do something about it. So it says farmers report missing millions of dollars of funding that were promised by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, despite promises from the Trump administration that a federal funding freeze would not apply to projects directly benefiting individuals. On his first day in office, President Trump ordered a USDA freeze to freeze funds for several programs designated by President Joe Biden in his energy health law from 2022. It's not really the point. We're going to move forward. Farmers who signed contracts with the USDA under those programs paid up front to build fencing, plant new crops, and install renewable energy systems, with guarantees that the federal government would issue grants and loans to cover at least part of the costs. Now with that money frozen, they're on the hook. So first, I want to say that this is a good example of why you should not get in bed with government. I know that there are things out there that, benefit people, but I would have never signed up for this deal because to me, this is kind of like debt. It's not really. So like if I were a farmer and this is what happened to, there's a specific case I'm talking about now. He took out a loan to get these projects done to expand his farm. And then now he's not getting that money reimbursed. And that's a bad idea. At minimum, he should have paid it out of his pocket and then hope for the best. It's the government, but this is an example of how now that these farm owners, and we're not just talking about large corporations, we're talking about independent farm owners here. Now that these farm owners have their money tied up in projects that they're not getting refunded for, they're not going to spend money. In fact, they're going to be hurting if something doesn't happen here. And all of their employees that they could have would also be hurting. And I'm pretty sure this is going to affect other parts of the market. If the person who built these fencing for these farmers can't get their money, they're going to have to start laying off people. Like it's going to have a snowball effect in a way that's profound that even I can't see all of. But I know that it's going to happen. I know that it's going to have cascading effects, and I don't know what those cascading effects are. But I'm predicting that it's gonna hurt the economy. So we have job loss, we have less money being spread through the economy, and in the long term it might be good. In the short term, I think it's bad. So that's all I'm talking about here. So I think I've made my point that people are getting fired. Those people are going to become rideshare drivers, and then those people aren't going to work anymore, which is going to lower demand. And then those people might become rideshare drivers, which saturates the market even more. And if that weren't bad enough, if that wasn't problematic enough. Oh, now we have to talk about the one that happened today, because this is one of the biggest ones. Again, won't get political, but I'm trying to paint a picture for you guys that will carry through the rest of this video. It says the IRS will lay off thousands of probationary workers in the middle of tax season, according to two people familiar with the agency's plan. So this article is a little dated, even though it came out yesterday. Today, the IRS fired, I think it was almost 7,000 people. An IRS employee told Federal News Network Thursday that the IRS fired about 6,500 probationary employees nationwide on Thursday and were escorted out of the agency facilities. Right, so like people are getting fired, people are getting let go, and unemployment is one of the strongest indicators of what's going to start happening with the economy. And then the next, so drivers, our business, we have to contend with unemployment. When people are getting fired, that's going to increase the saturation of how many people want to be drivers, and it's going to decrease the amount of people that want to go out and spend money on rideshare, going to parties or whatever, and not even going to work anymore. So those are two major things. Another thing that we're gonna have to start dealing with, and some places are already dealing with, is going to be the Robo-Taxis. It's going to be self-driving cars. And I know a lot of you are skeptical, or maybe I'm the skeptic, and you don't believe it's going to have an impact on your business. And I don't see how that's possible. And I don't see how you can believe that unless you're just not aware of what's happening out there. So this particular article, it says Uber CEO wants to partner with Tesla on Robo-Taxis because no one wants to compete against Tesla or Elon. Already, currently, if you are in Phoenix, it might be in a couple other places, if you pull up the Uber app as a passenger and you try to order a ride, you will have an option between a Waymo, a self-driving car, or a human being. And Uber said that 50% of the time, someone picks a human being. That means the other 50% of the time, someone's picking a Waymo. So even if in some of those places, they're not allowed on the highways or they're not allowed on the airports, one Waymo, from the math I've done in a previous video, is able to do about 220 rides per week. So if you have just 10 of them in your city, that's 2,200 rides that are now happening autonomously that wasn't happening with a person, or that used to happen with a person. They're going to have an impact on drivers. And it might not replace drivers 100%, but that's not the doomsday scenario. The doomsday scenario has already been happening before autonomous drivers. The doomsday scenario is Uber and Lyft are no longer a profitable venture for people to make money to survive on. That is something markets, certain cities have been struggling with before the introduction of self-driving cars. with the introduction of self-driving cars, it's only going to make that happen faster. So when you see other YouTubers, when you see other articles, when you see other people say that it's going to be 10 years before self-driving cars replace humans, that could be, but that does not mean that it's going to be 10 years before it's no longer profitable for you to be an Uber or Lyft driver. A lot of people feel that way today. So anything that can join in that battle for that dollar from a driver is going to have an impact. And there are things that I'm trying to do that I'm going to teach you in this video in order to shield yourself as much as possible from that happening. But let's go and read what the Uber CEO says about wanting to partner with Tesla, who's launching the first Robo-Taxi in June in Austin, according to Tesla. We'll see if it actually happens. So it says, during an earnings call last month, Tesla CEO Elon Musk said that the electric vehicle maker would start offering paid rides in June for its full self-driving Robo-Taxi service. Now Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi is making it clear that he doesn't want to compete with Tesla. He wants to partner with the company to offer Robo-Taxi rides through Uber's ride-hailing platform. He said this before and he's saying it again. Listen, quote, "No one wants to compete against Tesla or Elon if you can help it." Khosrowshahi told technology analyst Ben Thompson in an interview published in Thompson's newsletter on Thursday their capabilities are pretty extraordinary, but I think the same economic laws apply to them. And from a business perspective, I think that this is a good idea for Tesla to try to be the app where all the self-driving cars congregate, but that's not great for drivers. That's not great for human drivers. That is like more competition. You're competing with humans and you're competing with robots. If you don't have confidence that the robots can take your money and that's what you want to bet on, then fine, go ahead. But that's not where I would put my money. So Khosrowshahi said that Dara said that Tesla would benefit by allowing its robo-taxis to offer rides through Uber. Instead of rides accessing the robo-taxi solely through the Tesla app, they could tap into rides with self-driving cars through Uber too. Working with Uber could help maximize Tesla's profits by expanding its reach. Uber completed an average of 33 million trips per day, according to the company's latest earnings report. So it's a good point here. Uber already has the customer base. Tesla has the product, and they're just trying to mix the two together. And it's with Waymo. Waymo does have their own app, the Waymo One app, and Waymo is also available in certain markets on the Uber app. So they're doing both. And I don't think Tesla will do this. Tesla's very big on doing things themselves, but it wouldn't be a bad idea for them to do both for their own benefit. This is very bad for us if they were to do both. And here's the scenario. If they do both, let's say they don't even do both. Let's say they don't use Uber. So let's say they use the Tesla app or whatever it ends up being. And all it's going to take is one successful time for someone using the Tesla app to be less likely to open up Uber and Lyft. You'll have people who will probably do price analysis and time constraints based off of what they want. You currently have people that do Uber, people that do Lyft. But an example of someone in Phoenix who, when they open the Uber app, they're able to see the Waymos and they're able to see the humans. At least they're still in the Uber app. In California, you have people who use the Waymo One app, like to pick up their children, who probably aren't opening the Uber and Lyft app unless it's like there's something inconvenient happening with that Waymo. And that's just based off of what I've been reading and what I've been seeing online. A lot of people are like, I would never take this because humans are slow at adopting to new things. But the people that have been taking them constantly say they will continue to take them because the experience is better. They don't feel obligated to tip. They don't have to deal with a true random. They don't know who's going to pick them up. I mean, they know eventually, but they don't know what they're literally getting into at the time of the ride. So I can understand that people think that this won't adopt quickly. I understand that, but I think you're wrong. I straight up just think you're wrong if you think that. Dara added that if Tesla puts their robo-taxis on Uber's network, the self-driving cars would join 150,000 other Tesla vehicles on Uber today, adding to an established presence. It would be cool. So Tesla, unlike these other apps, plan to give people the ability to manage fleets. And according to Elon, we don't really know if this will happen or when it will happen. He's saying that anyone with Tesla would be able to just have their car drive, which that would be cool. If that's what it is, that's something I might be interested in the future once I clean up my finances, which we'll talk about later in today's video. So it says this isn't the first time that Dara has indicated an interest in partnering with Tesla. In an interview with Financial Times that aired in October, he said that he would love to bring Tesla's robotaxis to Uber when the technology was ready. He said that he aimed to collaborate with the autonomous industry, pointing to partnerships announced in late 2024 with Alphabet, Waymo, and Cruise. Cruise is done. You don't have to worry about them anymore. They couldn't do it. They couldn't make it. Waymo is actually doing things that should make you worry. They are investing into cheaper electric cars from China. One of them has been recalled already. So they're working on their issues. But let's see. Waymo recall. So this is what it looks like. It actually looks really nice. If I could buy one of these and not pay crazy import fees, I'd consider it. I think it costs $13,000. So it says Zeekr doesn't sell any of the electric vehicles in the United States. And as long as President Trump remains in power, it's unlikely it will anytime soon. To be fair, it doesn't. There have been crazy tariffs placed on Chinese cars because the government is worried that it will undercut American cars. So this is actually something that both sides of the aisle typically agree on. It says, however, Zeekr is behind the latest Robo-Taxis being tested by Waymo in the US. And early this month, the Chinese company issued not one, not two, but 3 recalls on the same day, right? So they are having some issues, which is good for us. And there's other recalls. We don't need to necessarily get into all of the recalls, but this is a progression in what's happening, right? This is a progression in the story. I've been telling you that, Google has been invested into getting cheaper fleets. They are working with Hyundai. They have a plant that they're building in Georgia where, Waymo is also expanding to Atlanta in. So they're making moves to put themselves in a position to make cars cheaper because the cars that they have now are extremely expensive, and they're making progress. And they're not the only ones making progress with self-driving cars. We're seeing Tesla's making their progress too. So this will all impact us. On one hand, we have people who are getting fired. That's going to cause people to spend less money, not go out as much. It's going to cause some of those people to become rideshare drivers in your market. And we're having to also contend with the fact that government grants have been stopped for a while now. And the money that was circulating into the economy is going to double down on the fact that people are not going to go out as much, and double down that they need to become Uber and Lyft drivers or food delivery drivers. And then we have self-driving cars that are launching in multiple cities, major cities, from multiple people. We have Tesla launching in June. It's just in a couple months in Austin, Texas. We have Waymo expanding to Atlanta, Miami. I think they're in Phoenix, LA. They're going to another town in California. They've dropped a couple names that they're already testing in. They're already testing in Atlanta. I'm not making this up. It's just a matter of when they're done testing, and they're picking difficult places. So if they're focusing on difficult places, and this technology learns and teaches other cars, for example, if one car hits a pothole, it's going to tell the other 60 cars in the fleet, hey, there's a pothole here. And they're going to all learn from that information. And they are picking difficult places. Once they solve those issues, their expansion is going to be very, very fast. And it takes a long time for us humans to get a grapple on our finances. It might take a year or two to get a good paying job, especially with unemployment going up. It's going to be harder. If my advice to you was, okay, because of what's happening, I recommend getting a solid job that still allows you to work during busy hours for rideshare. It's going to be harder to do that. It's going to be harder to get that job as unemployment increases. People are going to start working those jobs. And then, so those are like the things I want you guys to be aware of, and I want you guys paying attention to.